Hello everyone, welcome to Three Psych, and today we're going to be talking about the Attitudinal Psyche test again, and the in-depth aspects of the theories associated with this system. So last week I shared the Attitudinal Psyche test, and you all took it and you shared your results, and it's very easy to see how the four letters kind of make up a type based on what preference we have for those four letters within a type. But there's actually a lot more in-depth knowledge to this theory of attitudinal psyche, and I wanted to talk about these more in-depth aspects and what the real theory is for this personality system. Let's get into it. I'm just going to briefly go over what each of the letters means, but if you want to see more about this in depth, check out my first video on attitudinal psyche, where I go over the basics of the system in a more in-depth manner. So there's four letters in this personality system. There's volition, which stands for willpower and drive. Logic, which is logical thinking, analysis, knowledge, things of that nature. Physics, which is related almost to like MBTI sensing, where it's a focus on the physical world and your bodily health. Aesthetics, things of that nature. Then there's emotion, which is related to emotional values and things of that nature. So what attitudinal psyche does is it rank orders these things in any order from preferred to unpreferred, and then each of those four slots has a name and certain aspects of it. So the first slot is called the confident function. So your first function is something that you are quite confident in. It's your dominant function if you were relate it to MBTI. The second function is the flexible slot. The third is the insecure, and the fourth is the unconcerned. And the combination of where these functions go in order is what I'm going to talk about next, and how these things create different dichotomies that create the overall theory of attitudinal psyche. So here's where things start to get a little bit more complicated with this system, and where it becomes a little bit more in-depth. So each of the functions has extra aspects associated with it regarding ourself and how we perceive ourselves using it, and others and how we take information from others and how confident we feel in others' opinions about these things. And this translates to what's called being either self-positive or self-negative, and others positive or others negative. And each of the four functions in its slot in a type is going to have two of these things, self and others, and is going to be either self-positive, self-negative, and / or others positive, others negative. So for example, the first function in a type, so let's look at a type that has dominant volition like the VELF. Volition for the VELF is going to be self-positive, in that they are likely to appreciate their own input and feel confident in their own input regarding their volition, and they're going to be others negative, where they're going to be unconfident or unwilling to listen to others' opinions regarding their volition. And this is because this function is in the confident slot. They are confident with this function. They believe themselves to be proficient and adept in it, but they're not going to be as willing to listen to others in regard to this function. So each of the four function placement slots regarding their type is going to have the same preference for self, positive, and negative, or others, positive and negative. So for example, as I just mentioned a moment ago, the first function, or the confident function, is self, positive, and others, negative. The second function, the flexible function, is going to be others, positive, and self, positive. And this is interesting because it's called the flexible function, which means you're going to be confident in your own opinions regarding this function, but you're also going to be generally willing to listen to other people's opinions regarding this thing and kind of create a holistic view on this function. It's going to be the most positive function in your psyche, even though it's not the lead function. Now, the third function is the insecure function, and this one is quite interesting because it's self-negative and others negative. This is the one that we're going to have a lot of trouble with because we are insecure about this function. It's the thing where we're not going to be willing to listen to our own opinions, or we're unconfident in the conclusions we make regarding this function. We're also going to be generally uninterested or unconfident in the opinions that others give us regarding this function as well, which is why it's called the insecure function. Now, the fourth function, the unconcerned function, is also quite interesting because it's self-negative but others positive, which means we're generally not going to be too concerned with our own opinions regarding this thing, but we're going to be generally willing to listen, or at the very least outsource these type of things to somebody else. Which is to say, I might not be good at this, but I also don't really care that I'm not good at this, and I'm okay if somebody else gives me opinions regarding this thing. Now, outside of being either self-positive, self-negative, others positive, and others negative, there's also three more dichotomies that make up this personality system that also give depth to this system, in my opinion. and they have to do with pairs of functions and how these pairs are related to these dichotomies. So for example, the first dichotomy is probably the easiest to understand. It's the strong versus weak dichotomy, and it kind of explains how confident somebody is in their opinions related to these functions. And this one's going to be the first and second functions as strong versus the third and fourth functions as weak or unconfident. This one makes a lot of sense to me because your first and second function are also the ones that you're self-positive about, so you're generally willing to be confident about the decisions that you make as an individual. While with the third and fourth functions, we are self-negative, and therefore we tend to be slightly unconfident regarding these things and more so willing to kind of hear others, except for in the case of the third function where we are insecure and also generally unwilling to listen to others. But either way, it still falls into the weak category. The next dichotomy is the passive and aggressive dichotomy and describes whether or not we're going to be generally passive or generally aggressive regarding this function. So the flexible and unconcerned functions, which are functions 2 and 4, are noted as being passive, and they are described as being encouraging, attentive, trusting, understanding, unbothered, and willing to listen to others' understandings or opinions regarding this aspect. Now, the first and third functions are aggressive, and aggressive here is described as confident, skeptical, dismissive, unsure, mistrustful, downplaying, and unwilling to listen to others' understandings or opinions regarding this aspect. Now, this again goes back to the idea of being self-positive and others positive or negative, whether or not we have those traits and we're willing to be receiving towards these functions. So you'll notice that the passive functions have others positive, while the aggressive functions have others negative, and therefore we tend to downplay the opinions of others regarding these functions. So the final dichotomy here is the process or results dichotomy. The second and third functions, the flexible and insecure functions, are going to be process-focused, while the first and fourth functions are going to be result-focused functions. So process-focused functions, flexible and insecure, are described as both being focused on the exchange of information and journey of understanding regarding the aspect. They prefer to view the aspect as mobile and unfixed, constantly changing and evolving. They usually refuse to come to long-term conclusions regarding this aspect and prefer to view it as a flowing river of information. Now, the first and fourth functions, the confident and unconcerned functions, on the other hand, both focus on the points of beginning and end in regards to this aspect. They prefer to view the aspect as static, fixed, and serving a purpose in a specific point of time. They usually quickly come to conclusions regarding this aspect, whether they are comfortable with it or not. So the interesting thing when you're noting this dichotomy compared to the others is that the second and third functions, the process-focused functions, are both double positive or double negative. So the secondary function is both positive, while the insecure function / third function is both negative. And this tends to mean that you're kind of either really open to hearing all of the input regarding this thing, or you're kind of very insecure and closed off to hearing input regarding and coming from either others or yourself, and therefore you're not going to come to a conclusion as easily. And this is quite interesting to me because it either means that you're very, very open and thus willing to hear things through from all sides regarding this thing, or you're very closed off and it's hard for you to make a decision because you're unwilling to listen to others and yourself regarding this thing. In contrast to this, though, the first and fourth function are essentially the opposite of this in that they're not going to be as open or as closed, and they're going to be relatively one-sided regarding how they come to conclusions about this. So if they're self-positive and others negative, like the first function, the confident function, they're going to be very decisive about how they come to conclusions about this, and they're going to be very results-focused because they have a one-sided opinion regarding this thing. Now, the unconcerned function, or the fourth function, is going to be self-negative and others positive, and therefore is going to be fairly decided with the information that they receive from others or that they outsource to others. The fourth function is going to be that thing that we're not really confident about ourselves, but we also really tend to just not want to pay attention to, and therefore we're going to do our best to come to conclusions about it from others, or at least listen to others' opinions regarding this thing so we don't have to deal with it in the same way that we want to put energy into our first function. So hopefully, as you can see from this kind of video, this system, Attitudinal Psyche, has a lot more depth than I originally anticipated when I came across it. Learning about these three dichotomies, as well as the idea of self and others, positive or negative, has really opened this system up to me, and I think that this has turned the system from just another casual personality system to something that I'm really interested in kind of discussing and using in the future here on this channel, and maybe doing some even profiles regarding the personality types or temperaments, things of that nature. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more content related to Attitudinal Psyche, please let me know down in the comment section below what you think of this. They recently changed the test on the website and some people don't like the changes, so I don't know if the version of the test is going to be the same when you see this video if you're looking at it in the future. But know that I actually really think that this system is interesting and that you should look beyond the test to find your personality type. The test can point you in the right direction, but because there's 24 types, it's going to be very hard for this specific personality typing test to give you your first type right off the bat. You know, those aren't very high odds. So look at the system, look at the things that we've discussed today, the theory, and then decide for yourself which type you relate to the most and what can you do with that type of information. Thank you for watching, everybody. I do just want to remind everyone that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, assurpsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.